can comment. That's part of the point. Can you comment? Can you see what's happening here? Can you see what's happening here? Oh yeah, I think other people can comment. Hey, I got on a few minutes early just to see if I could make sure the technology was working. Hey, Deborah. I got on early to see if the tech was working because I had some challenges trying to do the same thing with Google Meets yesterday. It was already an eternity ago and quarantine time. Yes. Hi. Hey, everybody. If you have a minute now, once you have successfully logged on, if you have access to the Instagrams, hi there. Hey, Siobhan. Oh my gosh. Hey, Ed. Go to, on the Instagrams, go to Charming Disaster. Who are some dear friends of mine. I asked them today if they would consider making one of their charming disaster preparedness videos for quarantine, and they did. So if you would like to spend the next 3 minutes looking at something super cute, I actually snorted my tea right out my nose. Hello, hi everybody. So look at you, you're all so timely. Look, I'm working on my mad science hair now that I'm in quarantine and I don't have to not look like a troll doll. But don't worry. The material is prepared, even if my hair is outrageous. Oh my gosh, hey Danielle, that's so great. And if I don't acknowledge you individually, I can see you. There's just a lot of people jumping in. And Susan, I feel like this is telling my decades, but was it the romper room? Was that what it was? I see Marcus, and I see Danielle. I see my cup of tea. So for those of you that just got on, we've got 3 more minutes while we let folks join us. I wanted to get on a little early and experiment with this technology, make sure that it would work. My hope here is that I can record this so we can share it with other folks, because that was proved to be hard to do with the other format that I was using. My glasses are going to make me crazy because I can see myself reflected in them. If you just joined us and you have the Instagrams, go right now and look up the band Charming Disaster. They made a Charming Disaster preparedness video and uploaded it today on the subject of quarantine, specifically because I requested that they do that. And it was very funny. And they have a whole series of super charming, it's in the name even, super adorable videos. I particularly like the sort of apocalyptic first aid that they have, and also the makeup one makes me cry. If you've ever tried putting makeup on another person, it's very funny. So, all right, 2 more minutes. Get yourself a cup of tea or a hot toddy, whatever's good to support your old immune system these days. And we're gonna have a little fireside chat about the tarot. Hi. Hello, Astarte. Hello, Anne. Yeah, welcome, welcome. I'm Madame Onça. We've got 2 more minutes. So, here, I'll tell you a little story. See this castle over my head? Some of you know this, some of you do not. This is an actual castle. This is Muncaster Castle, which is in England. It's in the Lake District in England. And they have an international jester competition. Yeah, I'm okay, a little gravelly. They have an international jester competition every year. This is the castle that Tom Fool, the original Tom Fool, he worked there. He was the jester there. And then he actually became manager of the estate eventually as well. Did you cut your hair too, Siobhan? Oh, you did. I saw that. So Tom Fool lived in this castle. They had an international jester competition, and my partner won that competition. So he's the first American to ever be the jester of an English castle, which is why we have this painting, since it's very ostentatiously over my head. And my mother painted it. So, and this right here, other side, this chalice, which seems suitable for this tarot class, is actually made, it's turned from the wood of a tree on that estate that Tom Fool used to sit under. Hey, oh my gosh, hi Dave. So yeah, Muncaster Castle. And the good folks who own the castle, the Frost Penningtons, came to America when I got married, and they were like, whoa, we've come all this way and we still can't get away from our house. They were kind of shocked. But my mom painted it, so it's sentimental. Hey, Mary Dean, I look forward to meeting you. I know it won't be when Byron gets here as we had hoped, but it will be later. Of course, you may have noticed we've had to postpone her event due to the COVID situation. And hi, Paige. Hey, look at that. It's 7 o'clock. I will do my best to keep up with people's questions. I'll probably mostly, oh, hey, Lauren. I'll probably mostly answer your questions in batches because I'm just going to talk a lot for an hour. If you are a note-taking sort of person, hey, Paige. If you're a note-taking sort of person, feel free to stop and ask me to, clarify a point or whatever, and I will try to make sure that I go back through everything. I do like to refer you to other writers and authors who are far more accomplished on that front than I. Hey, Kelly! Oh my gosh! Like you need to know anything about the basics of tarot. But I know part of the point is that we're just all excited to have a chance to be together. I'm only officially on day 2 of quarantine, and I've already started like cleaning the grout in the shower with a toothbrush and so forth because I need people and things to do. So, for anybody just jumping aboard, yes, we need the human contact, exactly, which is partly why I was like, I'll just be hopefully amusingly disheveled as well as informative for you all. So, one of the things about social media, and I hope that this shared worldwide experiment will help. We often feel like we're supposed to use social media to only put our most curated selves forward, right? And, everyone is there with their best handstand and their most beautiful avocado toast and, their kid on their best day or whatever. And I think this presents us with a real opportunity to be a little bit more authentically vulnerable because everybody is, everyone who's paying attention is nervous, scared or anxious, or at the very least busy, or concerned about their neighbors. Hey, Joe. So, yeah, I think this will be an interesting opportunity for us all to be a little bit more authentic, if that's the word. So, that is, in fact, that's going to be my new email is Authentic Onça. Not that carefully curated Onça. Anyway, so hi, everybody. Oh my gosh, Polity. Oh, I love you. Hi. We're going to talk about tarot. This is very much a basics class. So those of you that are well versed in tarot, you are welcome to chime in. You are welcome to, just take it with a grain of salt. There's so much to cover. My intention, I'm going to do this basics class tonight and get people on some common footing, and then I'm going to continue to do these videos, hopefully 3 times a week, I think, during everyone's confinement, and then doing it in this format. Hopefully they will be available for people. Yeah, right. Hopefully they'll be available for people who aren't here during this time. Maybe they've got kids, whatever. Maybe you're out putting in your goats right now. I don't know. My goal is to make sure these videos are available for people throughout this, and hopefully we can feel like we're using this time to do something fun. I am happy to do this for everyone. It is a gift to the community and a gift to my own sanity. If you do want to put a cootie-free tip in my hat, you are welcome to PayPal me at futureoftradition, singular, at gmail.com, futureoftradition. And if you can't, that's totally fine. Maybe just drop me a note because, again, it's mostly about community. We're all concerned about money, but mostly we're all concerned about community contact. So let us start with this. Why am I doing this? Why me? Again, I'm Onça, or Madame Onça, or if I was a boy when I was born, I would have been named Virgil Davis. A lot of turns of the roads went from Virgil Davis to Madame Onça. But I started studying tarot over 20 years ago as part of a spiritual initiation. I was tasked with learning some form of divination. It could have been anything, and I always like to joke that, I'm a visual person as an artist, but also, it's so much harder to travel with entrails than with tarot cards. So, oh, hey, Joanna. So I started working with tarot, and I got the little white book, that goes with your deck of cards. The industry term for this, if you've never heard me say this before, is actually LWB. It is literally the little white book. And it is a challenging tool if this is all you have to work with, which is also part of why I'm making these videos, because for me, at least, these books were generally not sufficient to open the 800-year-old world of tarot to me. So I needed more. I realized for myself as an art type that the best way for me to do it was extremely focused, extremely intense study. I had a incredible study partner for years named Jessica Gadino. We wrote a book together on the subject of the tarot. That's her name, which of course will be backwards on here. But Jessica Gadino, and she's actually an acupuncturist now in Asheville, continues to be an awesome person. Hey, Ginger. I'm taking off my shoes while I talk to you, like Mr. Rogers. So Jessica and I wrote this book together. We had a study group, and I started making all of this art for myself, but I never had intended to share it. That was never part of the plan. I mean, I was living in a yurt. I was like getting my water out of a spring and washing my hair in a bucket. I kept my clothes outside in a Tupperware container. We didn't have cell phones back then, so my phone was literally, I had the phone company wire the phone jack to the side of my porch because I had no interior walls since I lived in a yurt. So suffice it to say, it was pretty rustic, and it never occurred to me that I could interface with the world of publishing in any way. That was not the point. Hey, don't, Dana. Anyway, as I got into the work, it took me years and years to make the art, and folks started saying, well, when are you going to get this published? And I had not thought about it, and eventually I did, and I started writing letters to publishers like you did back then, with paper and everything. And Llewellyn said, sure, we'll publish it as long as you've got a book. That's when Jessica and I wrote a book, and that was really the beginning of my path. Before that, I knew nothing about tarot. I didn't even really have any preconceptions about it. It just was... and I had the luck of finding an amazing teacher. Hey, Ginger Jameson. Oh, wow, totally a fan of yours. I had an amazing teacher named Kate Nordstrom. If you watched my talk on this the other day, I made reference to her. She's a great surrealist painter. I think that's the word you would use. If you want to look her up, Nord, like the North, N-O-R-D. I'm sure that you could find some of her work online. And she was very gracious with me and taught me a lot and got my feet under me. I was nervous about learning tarot because at that point it was very, it was more occult. And I don't mean that in the dark sense, but I just mean it was like literally harder to get the information. You had to find, the 2 books in the local bookstore or whatever, or go to another city to go to the metaphysical bookstore. I didn't know much about it. And was very happy and lucky to have been blessed in my path with people who could help. So that being said, the point is I would like to be a resource for you. And also, the internet is chock full of good resources, but I know it's more fun to get it from a person. So in this session, hey, Rachel. Normally, Rachel would be at my house right about now for classes. But of course, here we are in the quarantine, drinking my quarantini, which is tea. So that's about me. I know a bunch of you are very skilled readers, professional readers. Some of you have never read cards at all. And I just want to be here for all of y'all. In this time, we all need connection, and we also need logos, like a sense of meaning. We're not just paddling through the to-do list every day, waiting for the next thing, news update and so forth. So let us find some meaning together and some connection. I wanted to talk about the basic structure of the tarot. I usually do about an hour on history itself. For today, in order to keep things moving, I will refer you to the great tarot scholar, Mary K. Greer. I always mention her in my classes. She, again, had a sort of pivotal to me in my tarot journey and has written a zillion books. Again, she's one of the preeminent tarot scholars. Mary K. Greer, she has half the history that I would tell you she's written about. Anyway, that's her name right there, Mary K. Greer. Also Rachel Pollack, tarot genius. I got to stand near her and fangirl one time and get my picture taken. The important part that you need to know about the history, hey, hi Jasmine, what you need to know about the history is that while you are welcome to believe that tarot originated however you believe, you can believe it came from the pyramids, you can believe it came from Atlantis, you can believe whatever you want. What I would like you to not choose to believe is do not lean into the idea that the history of the tarot and the history of the Romani people are the same. And by Romani, I mean popularly known as the Gypsies. Please eliminate that word from your vocabulary unless it is yours to use, meaning you're from those people. But the 2 things became conflated in popular imagination, tarot and the Roma, and certainly in Hollywood, and that is not authentic. Oh, Dana. It's not. It ain't right, and it's not borne out by history. So you cannot see Nyx. You should have some place where you can like hit the camera. There should be like a little camera icon that if you click on, hopefully it means you'll see me. I don't know. Yes. So the cards show up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The first time that I have seen any reference to them was in an inventory list of a rich Italian family. Again, the average person or an itinerant person was not going to have tarot cards back in the day. They were definitely a precious object that was owned by rich people. So we see those cards. They travel through time. Every culture that gets a hold of them, they evolve, they change. They are a moving piece of interactive art. The important thing to know is that back in the day, there was not a lot of metaphysical drama around the tarot. Initially, it was just a game. It was a parlor game. In fact, you can still play modern card games called tarots. I have not learned to play it. Except for tarot cards, I'm actually terrible at games. I lack strategy. But it was just a game, like a parlor game. For those of you with belly dance heritage, you will know that as belly dance and flamenco find a common ground in the sort of the marriage form between them is zambra-mora. Tarot is like that with modern playing cards. If you go back far enough, it's actually called tarocchi in Italy. It breaks off when we get the modern tarot, we get the playing cards. They're the same cards. Hey, Paloma. Oh my gosh, Dunstable. Nice to see you too. So we see the cards are the same. A modern, what we consider a traditional tarot deck has 78 cards. And we'll spend quite a bit of time today describing the structure of, your standard traditional tarot deck. Oracle decks are different. You may have an angel deck or a fairy deck or one of those things, and that's not the deck of cards I thought it was. They can be, sorry, hon. They're totally worthy and useful, but it's a totally different system. This conversation will not help you at all. So Oracle decks are for another time. Likewise, there's the Lenormand deck is a totally different system. Very interesting. I haven't spent any time on it yet myself. It was popularized in the post-Napoleonic era and has a whole story about it. So Lenormand cards are also different. Tarot decks travel across countries, across borders. They change. The characters in them change. The specifics of the iconography changes. But in the turn of this century, we see this deck. Dun, 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 dun. It's hilarious that this most important deck of the century has this ridiculous plaid back. But this is the front side of it. This is the distinctive art style of Pamela Coleman Smith. I'm sorry. Hey, hon. Hey, I'm in the middle of doing a Facebook Live tarot class. I'll call you later. Bye. Apologies, he's driving home from Texas. I'm glad he's finally coming home. So, here we see the Pamela Coleman Smith deck. The style is very distinctive. There's volumes that can be said about this deck. I will say this, it was probably made around like 1890-ish. Pamela Coleman Smith is a character that you should read about if you're, oh really? Oh, thanks, Paloma. You should read about her if you're interested in seeing history through that feminist lens, because she's a really fascinating character. More and more is known about her all the time. Originally, she had sort of disappeared in the mists of history. This deck was known as the Rider-Waite deck. It was named after the guy who paid for it and the guy who published it, not at all after the woman who actually did all of the art. So as a way of sort of reclaiming history for her, it's now often called the RWS, or the Rider-Waite Smith deck for her. So Pamela Coleman Smith, or Pixie Smith, fascinating person. She was an artist. She was that shocking thing, an independent woman and unmarried in the Victorian era. And she was also a truly mystical. She would paint. She'd go into a sort of trance state, listening to music and paint and so forth. All that being said, hey, Jordana, oh my gosh. Hi. All that being said, when I first started working with this deck, which is one of the decks my teacher, Kate Nordstrom, used, I was not amused. I thought it was very dry, very boring, sort of the worst of what the Victorian era had to offer. And from my point of view as a young radical person of ideals, I thought it looked like a bunch of skinny, rich white people uh, wandering around in gardens. You know, it lacked representation, and that really bothered me. So I sort of threw this deck over my shoulder. I didn't think about it for years until I really started digging into my study, and I realized what a genius this woman was. In my own deck, which I made, which is this one, the World Spirit Tarot. I know a bunch of y'all out there actually have this deck. You can see right there, representation was super important to me. This is a super traditional deck. It is this deck, essentially, with 100 extra years of deconstructing sexism and racism and homophobia piled on top of it. This deck is practically perfect. But what it had is it reflects the qualities of the time. So, and I just did a reading for somebody the other day, and I felt like I had to apologize the entire time I was using this deck. I felt like I had to apologize for the lack of representation in the deck. I've really gotten spoiled by using decks that offer that. What Pamela Coleman Smith did that was so great, in a nutshell, is that she took all of these cards, the pip cards. These ones, they are the ace, the 2, the 3, the 4, the ones that are, hi, baby. The baby says hi. Hi, baby. What she did is that she illustrated the pip cards. Previously, this would have been a picture of, 8 discs. And you had to either be psychic or have an amazing memory to know what the 8 of discs was about. Pamela Coleman Smith illustrated them and made a graphic novel out of it. And that is what has not only made accessible to so many more people, which we love, yay, the proletariat, but it also blew the world of the art wide open for creators of every flavor. I mean, any tarot deck you need, it's out there. If you need a pornography tarot, there is one. If you need one that is cats and unicorns, you can find one. There's a James Bond tarot. There's a baseball tarot. Right here in front of me, I have the steampunk tarot. There's something for every sort of heritage, for every mythology, for every kink, so to speak. So that's really because she made it so much more accessible. So we can thank her for that. Again, this is from around the 1890s. The next deck that I'm going to call attention to right now in my quick crash course of this is the Thoth deck. There's the back. The art is all over the place. It's very sort of wildly modern for the time. This is the Book of Thoth, also known as the Aleister Crowley deck. And it's a great deck. Not everybody loves it, but it's important in the history of the cards. Wish we had time to talk more about it today. Again, my teacher used that deck a lot as well. Again, this deck, Book of Thoth, Aleister Crowley deck, it was actually made by a woman, Lady Frida Harris, who worked extensively with Crowley on the images. I imagine he was a very difficult client and that it took them a lot longer. It was one of the last big projects he did in his life before he succumbed to old age and asthma. So it's worth getting that book, or rather that deck, and spending some time with it. There's a lot of round decks that come up in the 60s, or a couple of them, I should say, Daughters of the Moon, Mother Peace. Those are really cool in that they were an attempt by tarot artists and women to sort of, we would say now that they're trying to break the gender binary and rattle some of the isms out of the deck, because it is an art form that has to evolve to suit the times. Oh my gosh, Farhad. Yeah, so they worked in using a round format to try to do that, and then we really come into the modern era where we have, again, a deck for everything possible. The decks that I most use, again, the Thoth deck, occasionally the Rider-Waite-Smith, mostly my own deck, and this is my new favorite, the Gummy Bear Tarot. When you spend a lot of time being very serious about being very witchy, this is hilarious. The Gummy Bear Tarot is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Again, it's a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. Same deck, same art, same little white book. It's the same art, just redrawn with gummy bears. Also comes in this handy dandy little tin. Hey, Nancy! So I love that we live in the age of handy dandy little tins. So, and if you're interested in working with cards with younger people, I know that's a very hot subject for some people. Some people are not into that idea. I have been slowly working with my own Kids on Tarot using this deck because it makes it really easy to make a jump from this to the Rider-Waite-Smith and from there to other decks. So there's your history. Now we're going to talk about the structure of the traditional deck. Traditional deck, sorry if that was loud. Traditional deck has 78 cards. That is all the cards that you would know from your playing cards. Hi everybody who's just joining us now. That is all the ones that you know from your regular playing cards, the ones you use to play poker, plus the major arcana. I've actually taken the majors out of my own deck and used it to play poker. That's totally a thing you can do. Turns out, you know, it's functional, it's just slow. The cards are big. A traditional tarot deck has 78 cards. They are the major arcana and the minors. In fact, I'm going to read you a fascinating quote at this time.
Unknown corner.
I'm sorry, I'm so popular. That's probably the school is calling to tell me that they're out, like I hadn't noticed. This is if you're really interested in digging into some history, this is really about playing cards themselves. There's just a nod to the history of the tarot, but Roger Tilley has a few charming quotes, and indulge me while I read to you in his florid language. This is about how riled up people were about games and the evils of tarot. All right. Oh, and my favorite phrase. Oh, Avani. What is the meaning or significance of the tarots? Book after book has been written in support of every shade of opinion, ranging from derision to veneration, from the view that the cards are no more than the tools in trade of the charlatanic fortune teller. It's the best phrase. Charlatanic fortune teller, to the belief that with the Bible and the Great Pyramid they form the three supreme mysteries of all time. So somewhere between charlatan and great triumvirate of mystery, that's probably where most of us find ourselves. The question that this author, Roger Tilley, then brings up is like, nobody's quite sure how those 22 extra cards, the major arcana, ended up in here, but he does say, it is most unlikely the original artist drew 22 designs at random, that is to say, quote, doodled. It's as if the writer gave himself permission to use the word doodled. Almost certainly he followed a theme, and art cannot be divorced from the cultural climate of its time. I think that's a very important point as we continue to help the tarot evolve and shed some of the baggage that comes with it. Because, you know, again, it is a tool of the people. There is no one organization or entity that says the tarot means this and it must be handled in that way. And thank goodness, because I am not a fan of monopolies, right? Charlatanic. Needs like another finger. I'm not sure. Charlatanic. The other quote, Roger Tilley here is actually quoting a pastor from 1450 who was in a dither. Now, interestingly, you'll notice, hey, Trishelle, the anger that this pastor has about the tarot is not about its like charlatanic fortune telling, but just as a game at all. It's not so much about it's not the sort of post-Christians concerns that we have all had to live with as far as having an interest in the cards, but rather specifically about gaming. So bear with me. Oh, and so the major and minor arcana are also known as the triumphs or the trumps. I personally don't use the word trump anymore in this context because I prefer not to cross the streams. But triumphs is what those cards were called. Oh, hey, Jessica, or Jackie. Concerning the third class of games, that is, triumphs, there is nothing in the world of gaming so hateful to God as the game of triumphs. I feel like I have to turn my flashlight up this way. Oh my gosh, it's so silly. For everything that is base in the eyes of the Christian faith is seen in triumphs, as will be evident when I run through them. For triumphs are said, so it is to believed, to have been given their name by the devil, their inventor. Because in no other game does he triumph so much as in this one. In this game, not only are God, the angels, the planets, and the cardinal virtues represented and named, but also the world's luminaries. I mean, the Pope and the Emperor are forced, a thing which is ridiculous and degrading to Christians, to enter into the game. These 21 triumphs are the 21 steps of a ladder which takes man into the depths of hell. This is out of no disrespect to anybody's faith. I just thought that this person really put a lot of careful wording into being a dither about these images. Hey, Kylie. So, charlatanic fortune telling. Now we're going to talk about the actual structure of the card. So once again, we've got 78 cards. There's the 52 that you probably already know, those of you that aren't familiar with tarot, and then we've got those majors, the triumphs, that are the ladders, the ladder rungs to hell. We're going to talk about those minors first. The minor cards, we describe them as the pips, the numbered cards. If you have a deck in front of you, you can spread them out and look around. You will see there is an ace, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, a 9, and a 10. Those are the pips, also known as the numbered cards. These are the cards that come up when we are, I was thinking of them as sort of the laundry list, the cards for daily living. When those major cards, the triumphs, come up, it's usually describing something in your life that is like a big life lesson or a big challenge or something that your whole culture is going through, whereas these minor cards tend to be a little bit more individualized. They're just your day-to-day, how do I respond to the challenges I'm having with so-and-so kind of cards. You can think of the ace through the 10. It's almost like a volume knob. Or if you're more of a gaming type person, it's like levels unlocked. That ace describes the very seed, the gateway of the suit. And in my deck, I actually made the element of each suit sitting here inside this Vesca shape, inside that vulva, to really represent that notion of like stepping through a gateway. When you get a lot of aces in a reading, it suggests the beginning of something new. It is pure, raw potential. And then the question for you, as the person doing the reading or the person receiving the reading, is really, are you going to step forward? Are you going to step? I was thinking of it as the saloon doors. Do you step through the saloon doors into the adventure? So there's your ace. As we continue to turn up the volume on the suit, the qualities of that suit amp up. With that, I should jump back. So there are 4 suits. In those minor cards, we have 4 suits. Just like with playing cards, they are literally the same thing. I made a list because I always miss the 4th one when I'm talking. Those 4 suits, we've got the wands. Wands are sometimes known as staves, and in the old playing cards, of course, they're clubs. That is the element. These are the classic Western elements. We don't have to mistake them for reality. This is before we knew, about the periodic table. But they do, metaphorically, they represent fire, passion, drive, ambition, willpower, and so forth. So there's your first suit. Your second suit is going to be swords. Swords, you may know them from playing cards as spades. In Italian, of course, it's spade, literally means sword. And that is the suit of air. That is the suit of intellect, communication. Of course, there's your power of air. And I find often for women, it's also boundaries and using your words to clarify boundaries. Pentacles or discs or stones, these ones tend to have a lot of different names in the cards. They are diamonds, and they represent the element of earth, and they are your practical stuff. They are your health and wealth, and as I always tell my gamer pals, it's like gold coins and hit points. They're the units of measurement that you have to measure your security, your wellness, that kind of thing. It's very practical. And then the last one is cups, or sometimes chalices. That is hearts, and that is your element of water. And that represents emotion, to a certain extent, like how we feel, relationship, and to a certain extent, sometimes creativity, that kind of thing. It's really, it's the sloshy, juicy parts. So in those pips, again, we find there's, you've got the ace. So if it's the ace of cups, it is like a renewal. It is the beginning of the ability to be in relationship. If you find that it is If it is wands, this is you're on a threshold in terms of initiating a new project. There can sometimes be a fertility component to that, so beware. It's always this notion of a fresh start. And thanks to everybody who's here. We've got quite a crowd now. Then we come to the 2. The 2 is, as the ace is the seed, the 2 is the part where you begin to interface with the world or the lessons of the suit. It is a sense of confronting and working with the other. So it's all about having a sense of, when I do things, it has consequences. If I do this, this is how it happens. If I interact with so-and-so, this is the return. So 2s are really about that, like baby steps. 3 is it's not just that there's one other thing in the world. It's that you realize that you're in a universe of many. So when the 3s come up, it's a level of like just next level development. Sometimes that you experience that as frustration, like the 3 of Swords. We see a lot of heartbreak and hard lessons, and some of the other ones we find ourselves in the 3 of Wands. We find ourselves seeing an initial level of attainment as we step through into feeling proficient and like, I've learned to not only walk but to run. We come to the 4. Hey, Alyssa. We come to the 4. 4s are about stability. 4s are, there's 4 legs in most tables. There's 4 legs on most cows. So we find that 4, when we see a lot of 4s in the reading, it speaks to like a sense of initial plateau. Yeah, there's like a hands-on accomplishment. That's the part where you can sort of put a pin in it and go, all right, this is where we are. Take a breath, behold, because then come the 5s. And as my teacher, Kate Nordstrom, used to say, the 5s are, 3 is a magic number, 5s are the chaos cards. When those cards come up, it usually means that you had a nice table, it was a 4-legged table or a 4-legged cow, and things were under control, and everything was, there were a lot of known knowns. The 5 comes along, and you're flipping tables, and everything is thrown over, and you are having to reevaluate everything, and it's a way of describing metaphorically our an interaction with the elements we cannot control. Hey, Lisa. So there's your 5s. And I know I'm talking fast, but we only have an hour. After the 5s, we come to the 6. 6 is like an extra stable table. So you sort of catch your breath. You find yourself having survived the chaos of the 5s. And in the 6, we find another level of like, oh, I got this. All right. We usually find another level. You are now not only functional, but you are experienced. You have gained wisdom through the adventures and misadventures of your 3s and your 4s and your 5s. And then we come to the 7. My teacher used to refer to them as the vortex cards. So it's another opportunity to confront the unknown. I find that the 7s have a lot of, there's an element of evaluation in them. I always think of them as an opportunity to sort of evaluate your systems. Oh, Nancy. Yeah, it's a chance to sort of evaluate your systems and see, is that all there is? Is this what I wanted to do? Shall I change? Shall I change course? Shall I improve? Shall I tear this crop out? Or shall I fertilize this crop? That's your 7s, because there's a lot going on. 8s, the extra stable table. 8s are the cow that cannot be tipped. I don't know. Yeah, the 8s tend to be, I was trying to find a way to describe this today. To me, the 8s and the 9s are often the best of what the suits have to offer. Or maybe it is the most clear, vibrant expression of what the suit has to offer. And by that, I mean, here's the 8, it's stable and accomplished. You get to the 9, it's even a little extra. And then the 10 often is almost too much. If you're familiar with the expression, too much Christmas, like you can have too much of a good thing. You've had, candy, candy, candy all the time. It's not to say that the 10s can't be nice cards to experience. But if you were to look at the sort of the curve of the experience of living through each aspect of a suit, that 8, that 9, it's sort of the best part. And then the 10 is like the part where you fall down on the trampoline. Um, I think of it also the metaphor of of a banana. There's a part the banana is like at the very beginning, it's so green and so hard that you could go through a lot in order to turn it into food, but like on its own, it's still really clearly in process. By the time you get to the 8, it's perfect. By the time you get to the 9, it's still a banana and it smells good and it's slightly bruisey. And by the time you get to the 10, it's still a banana and you can eat it, but you better turn it into banana bread. That's how I imagine the arc of the cards. So that brings us essentially from ace all the way through to the 10 in your pips. Then we come to the people cards. The people cards to me are the most challenging cards to read. Hey, Cameron. They're the most challenging cards to read in the deck. You might think, if you're not already a reader, that it would be, that it would be the memorization of what the minor cards mean, or that, dun dun dun, when the major triumphs come out, that it's, oh no, it's the death card and the devil card and the lover's card. Those cards are not particularly hard to read because they're so clear and they're almost cartoonishly loud. They are like they're archetypal in a sense. They're almost like giant emojis that say, this is how you feel about this. The people cards, on the other hand, are tricky for me. And if you're somebody who reads them easily, by all means, show me your secrets. The people cards, often also called, right? They're called the court cards or the nobles. I started calling them the people cards years ago because part of the evolution of the cards for me, as we see, the art cannot be separated. It cannot be divorced from the culture of the time, as Roger Tilley mentioned in his book. We are trying to peel away these layers around gender and sexism and imperialism and heteronormativity and all that sort of stuff, which has been useful in the cards as they existed over the centuries, I guess, but really isn't useful anymore, right? We're trying to change all that stuff up. And so for me, getting the concept of nobility, which is intrinsically classist, out of the cards was really important. Maybe it's because I was living in a yurt at the time hauling my water, but it didn't make any sense to me that we would be using these sort of very affluent images of humanity to represent ourselves. I didn't know those people. So, people cards, or court cards, or nobles. I will refer you again, hey Nikki, I'll refer you to Mary Greer's book, Understanding the Tarot Court. Mary Greer is one of my favorite authors. She's very accessible, very knowledgeable. She continues to travel the world digging tarot history out of art museums and all kinds of crazy places. It's worth just reading her blogs and so forth. She wrote this book, and I'll tell you sometime this book has a big part in my coming back to tarot. I also did the cover for it. But Understanding the Tarot Court, this is basically a workbook, playbook to help you get familiar and comfortable with those cards. 2 of the ways that you may find useful to think about it. If you're a Myers-Briggs personality test kind of person, a lot of people find that is a useful way to think about it. The people cards, there's 16 of them in most decks. There's 4 suits, there's 4 people, 4 nobles, or face cards as they might be called, in each one of those suits. There's 16. Many people have found it's very productive to match those up with Myers-Briggs personality test types. So if that is a window for you that works, by all means do that. I will now attempt to break down for you a little bit about each of those 4 sort of stations, that kingliness, that queenliness, and the other 2, with disclaimers that apply. I want to preface this by saying that gender is over for me as far as I'm concerned. So when we say tarot kings, tarot queens, I never read those as being gender specific. I look at these as personality types. When the cards come up in a reading, I look at these people cards and I say, this is probably a person in your life, querent, whether that's myself or a friend or a client. Probably a person who has some bearing on your situation, and it is always speaks to something that you need to
be leaning into or be aware of yourself at the same time. So I look at it as a sort of a mirroring effect. There's somebody out there, but it's also about what's going on in here. Typically, we'll have kings or something like it. In my deck, they are sages, because again, I wanted to lean into the quality of the person, not the worldly power, let's say. And by the way, for those of you that got here late, I hope you're enjoying my crazy troll hair. Myers-Briggs, yay! Kings or sages, whatever they might be called in whatever deck you're using, they tend to represent an authoritative, meaning informed, not just bossy, an informed leadership, stewardship, guardianship in the area of that suit. So that is somebody saying, I am the King of Swords or the Sage of Swords. I function best in the world of ideas and intellect and communication, and I am here to lead the way and create a brave new world with my brilliant hacking abilities. Oh, pshaw. The Queen, or in my deck, she's the Sibyl. Again, because I wanted to make it about the quality of the person and not a presumed power structure, because again, gender is over and fuck classism. It's classism got us in half the dilemmas we're in right now. The queens speak to, again, a level of maturity and capability and stewardship. And I'm going to use the word husbandry as in, again, guardianship. That is about how we relate to other people, relationships. It used to be considered that in the old books, the king was like, he does the stuff in the world and the queen does the stuff in the home. Again, even in my own lifetime, I'm almost 50 years old. That's not been the case. My mother did all the things. So that whole gender business, we don't need to be limited by that. But we can recognize that the king represents functioning in this sphere, in a broad sphere, and the queen is, and for our purposes right now, is going to be more about how we relate in closer, more personal sphere. For those of you that know a lot about cards and are saying, but wait, I swear, there's caveats for that. But we're going for generalizations. It's like you can say, drag queens are like this. All drag queens are different. I mean, we're talking about real people, right? Not leaning into stereotypes. But there are some things that you could say about most drag queens and trying to come up with a definition. That's how I feel about talking about these queens. They're all very different. But if we're looking for some sort of swooping category, a basket we can put them all in, that's the one I'm going to put them in for the purposes of this talk. The next station is typically a knight, a prince, something like that. In my deck, it is the seeker. So it is that there's an element of the dynamic. And this is typically represented by someone astride a beast. In the Thoth deck, maybe he's in a chariot pulled by a lion. In mine, they're all on these horses. There's a beautiful deck called The Light and Shadow, which I highly recommend for the art. It's extraordinary, by Michael Gepford and Brian Williams. And all of these questing personalities have different, they're like on eagles and all kinds of stuff. It's fantastic. But there's this notion of being astride something. And I think of that astrideness, I describe it as being a teenager with a car. So the notion is that this personality knows they don't have all the information. They've done their due diligence. They've got their gifts and their intuitions, and they are ready to put the wheels to the pavement and learn what they don't know by going out into the world. So it is a questing sort of a personality. Again, relative to the suit, are you talking about Pentacles, where you're there to like really, dig in and learn everything there is to know in a devoted, studious way, whereas, for the Seeker of Swords, it's more like I'm in love with the idea of being in love, and I just got to go be everywhere and be all things to all people, but never committed. So, but in all those cases, there's a sense of activity. And then we come to what is the page or the princess. In mine, it is the seer. And that is to suggest not exactly passivity, but a different relationship with the seeker. It's a little bit more about absorbing information than about bold action. And that there's typically it's presented as something sort of youthful, um, in some decks and systems as being very feminine. Again, we don't give a shit about that. But this notion of, I think of it as being the part of a person that is able to look inward and like, I need to write my thoughts down in my journal. I think I'm going to make a song about that. I think I'm going to go to a deep and quiet place with that. That's kind of how I imagine the seer. Can be a really dynamic personality, but in a very different way from the king type personality. Again, those of you who are well versed in the people cards, I hope you understand how hard it is to sum them up. It's like summing up your whole family in bold truisms. If all of that is a lot to hold on to, and you're like, I still don't really get the whole people card situation. Again, I encourage you to, read Mary's book, see if that helps. If you aren't a systematic thinker, and numbers don't mean much to you, or sweeping generalizations don't carry your thinking, if you get to know all 16 of these cards as people, you'll totally get to know them, and it will make so much more sense in a reading. You're going to go, oh, it's that bossy Queen of Swords. She legitimately knows everything, and is so good with systems and so not good with people skills, and gets the cold shoulder for being bossy, for being shrill, and nevertheless she persists in kicking ass. You'll get to know each of these people cards, and it will help you tremendously. So yes, so that brings us around. We've gone from Ace to 10, and then we've spent some time with those people cards. Again, I want to remind you, I'm happy to just share everything I know with you, and I'm going to do this 3 times a week through this whole quarantine, and these will be recorded live, so we can share them on the internet. You are welcome to tip me if you like. In the before times, I used to get $200 an hour, $250 an hour teaching tarot, but in the moment, I'm just happy that I get to be in my warm house and share with you guys. So thanks for receiving the information. The other things I wanted to share with you in the remaining 13 minutes. How does tarot work? That's one of those questions. A lot of times people come into a class and folks will say, I always heard this was, that it was scary, or it was disreputable. I was always told not to be interested in this sort of thing, but you seem nice and it seems fine. Who is to say how this works? Some people believe that you have a guardian angel that is helping you pick the right card. Some people think it's crazy random happenstance, and we just pick cards at random, and it's a useful mirror to look at pictures and contemplate ourselves in the spectrum of 800 years of evolving imagery. I tend to think that we all know more about what's happening with us and the world around us all the time. We all know more than we think we do, and the cards give us permission to peel back the layers and go, I knew I should trust my instincts on that, or this is that thing I always do, or I thought I felt something shifting in the community. So for me, my perspective is that it is just a matter of us having a tool to give ourselves permission to be as smart as we really are. But if you are the guardian angel variety, or whatever works for you, no one can say. Nobody knows. Go with your own truth, but go fearlessly. When it comes to how we read, we're going to do many other sessions about that. I just want to encourage you to know that you get to be creative and flexible. There is no one right way to do it. Some people let other people touch their cards. Some people don't. I always let people touch my cards, except this week, because cooties are real, and I had to put my deck in quarantine this week and work with a different tarot deck. But not for metaphysical reasons, just for like very literal virological reasons, right? You can keep your cards wrapped up in silk and velvet if that helps you feel like they are, if that's part of the ritual that helps get you in an intuitive headspace. You can do that. Or you can keep them in your back pocket or your school backpack. There is no right way to do it. Some people need to spread out a pretty cloth to lay their cards on. Other people just, sweep the bagel off the counter. So you just have to find the thing that works for you, and I will work with you in the next couple of weeks to try to figure out what is your approach to that. I always call what I do the sort of kitchen witch mentality. as a multitasking Gemini. Ain't got time for that. I like to do it. I like to keep it accessible. Okay, I think that's about 50 minutes of talking, and I know we're doing this on the comments here, but I would like to try to answer some questions. So if you all want to just throw up some questions here in the comments, we'll do that. It's Q&A time. Anything about how you read, what cards you work with. The use of significators is a whole thing that we didn't even talk about today, and I have plenty to say about that, being from the Awesome Town Ranty School of everything. While I wait for some questions, I think there's like a 2-minute lag between what you type and what actually receives me. I'll do a little bit more myth busting. So, some of the other myths that need to be busted is the notion of, well, let's explore, what is the notion, what is tradition? My PayPal, my email, my business, all of those things are called future of tradition because I believe firmly that all these things need to evolve. Tradition, in the case of tarot, we know that what we do now with the cards is different than what they were intended for. It was a parlor game. All of these layers of meaning, oh yes, thank you, reverses. All of these layers of meaning are accretions over time. Whoever first laid these cards out as a game was not thinking, oh, these match the elements of fire, and they are the classical elements, and they speak to different areas of our life, and these are the Myers-Briggs personality types. All of these things are layers of meaning that we have been able to add to the cards over the centuries, and it serves us. And when it no longer serves us, we can shift those meanings in accordance with the sort of world spirit of our time, as it were. That's super important. That means that all this, like, what is traditional stuff? Yes, you can buy a deck. You can pick a deck out you like. You can buy any deck that speaks to your art. If somebody gives you one, that's great. And if you don't like it, you don't have to burn it. You don't have to throw it away or bury it. You don't have to make a big to-do. You can sell it on eBay. You can give it to someone else. You can keep it around for the day when the deck that you really like, somebody gets their virus germ hands all over it. You don't have to make a big to-do about a deck. It is a lovingly crafted object that is made out of pieces of paper that were published in a factory somewhere. Whatever metaphysical powers they have is really because you bring it to the piece of art. That being said, so you can buy a deck, you can give a deck, you can sell a deck. You don't have to burn tarot decks. That's, I mean, if you want to, you do you, but it's not strictly speaking called for. You can store them however you like. If you need to get the goopy energy out of them, hey Sean, if you need to get the goopy energy out of the cards after reading for somebody with goopy energy, there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can sit them in a bowl of salt. Don't know why it helps, but it does. Maybe because salt is the only rock that humans have to eat to live. You can also stack the cards from 0 to 78, basically sort of the factory reset seems to shake the cooties out. And if you are a sort of seining, smudging kind of person, you can definitely do that sort of thing. I would encourage you, if you are a smudger, to look into the ethics of why you feel a need to do that with this herb versus that herb, and whether you can explore different ways of approaching this concept of using smoke and energy to clear the cards out without treading in anybody else's emotional and spiritual territory. Okay, so those were a few myths. Let me go back and answer these great questions. Yes. So questions include, Hope asked about, do you do reverse meanings? What that means, reversals are, let's imagine this is the top of the card and this is the bottom. This is the person's head, this is their feet. If the cards end up this way and the card is upside down when you flip it over, you can opt to read them in reverse, meaning if this card represents a good day, this represents a bad day. I personally do not read reversals. I feel like with 78 cards, we have already got so many windows into the variety of human experience. I usually determine which aspect of the card is being spoken to by the cards around it, like by the company it keeps. An example is the Five of Wands. The Five of Wands is typically a picture of 5 guys hitting each other with sticks. It's the card that represents competition. Competition at its best is making things stronger, faster, making you, training to be the best possible athlete. Competition at its worst is kneecapping somebody because you find them to be a threat, right? So I look to see which aspect of competition is being spoken of by the cards around it. That being said, if reversals work for you, you're welcome to read them. Barbara Moore, who's another author that I love her work, and she used to be my editor at Llewellyn. Barbara Moore, right there. Moore with an E. She's a great writer, and the way she described it, she said lots of people use reversals at various points in their reading career, and at some point you might just stop, and then you might go back to it. So if it works for you, personally, I think as a new reader, you've already got 78 sets of meanings to memorize. Don't add a layer. So Kelly, about significators. So the significator is one of the ways that you can read for someone is you pick a card to represent them. It's almost like an avatar would be the word that we might use now, or like the me weeble. So you pick a card that represents them, and you're saying, if this is the work surface, you're saying this is the card that represents this person, and here's all these other cards in relation to them. There's a lot of different ways to do that. One, if you let people handle the cards, you can just hand them the cards and say, pick out a card that you feel like speaks to what's happening for you. They can literally use any card in the deck as a significator, as an avatar. There was a school of thought, I don't know where it came from, and I wish I did because I would have very strong words for them. It's probably some turn of the century colonial bullshit. I don't know, but there was an unfortunate thing for a while where of the 16 people cards, the reader would pick a card to represent the person they were looking at, and they would do it based on their appearance. What this means is that if you were a blonde, blue-eyed woman, you would be the Queen of Swords. If you were a person of color, you would be the Queen of Pentacles, because black people and pentacles, the element of earth. It's so intrinsically racist, it's shocking. Not only that, but you can see in there also blonde, blue-eyed people being the suit of the intellect. You can see there's so much in there, and there's so much of what's wrong with our world. So we're not doing that. Throw that right out the door. Also, that whole premise that I think it was swords were blonde people and pentacles were people of color, and like wands were redheads. I think this whole model also is so steeped in a time and place where, like, were there even other people from other continents in this model? So we're not doing that. If you use significators, pick something based on what someone is actually like, what they feel like, how they identify, not just what you think they look like. So, end rant on significators. Alma, I know you do have tiny hands. I should look into seeing if I can make a miniature version, because I'm going to have to do a reprint. My cards ended up being a little bit big, because, here's an example, because they're all block prints. I carved all the originals. They were 8x10s. So you can see proportionally, this is the Rider-Waite Smith, and here's the Priestess, and here's the Empress. See how these are so wide? That's because I made them for myself to suit my art aesthetic, not because I ever imagined they'd be cards other people would be using. So if you have tiny hands, they're kind of wide. If you have big man hands, they work out great. I apologize. It's totally cool to ignore Brianna. Yes, I don't, like I said, I don't particularly worry about reversals. That's up to you. Paloma, also don't bother with reversals. It's up to you. The Light and Shadow is Michael Gepford, Gepford, maybe. It's a beautiful, it's also linoleum block, which is the same as mine. It's a black and white deck. Brian Williams was a great tarot writer who they wrote the book together. It's beautiful art, and it's a real mix between this classic Rider-Waite Smith family and also the Thoth deck. You can really see that they went back and forth between the sort of two classics. Thank you for the lesson. Yeah, that's right. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Aw. Thanks. Okay. Jasmine says, what to the classes to come? I absolutely will write that down for you in the class invites. So Jasmine's asking what in future classes what we need, because obviously I just talked at you for an hour. I would love to get to the part where we're actually doing readings together. Trying to figure out how to do that in this format is a little challenging, but I'm sure there's a way. I would say if you have a deck have it, like bring it. If you have a notebook, bring it. And maybe to do some screen shares or something. Oh yeah, thanks. And where you can get my, you can buy it from me if you want. I have an Etsy store, Madame Onça Studios, and if you just look up, my website is hardestworkingwomaninsshowbusiness.com. It's super in flux right now, though, so maybe finding me on either Amazon or the other one, or Etsy. World Spirit Tarot. You want this edition, probably. There are some copies of the first edition. I do not have them, and people are selling them for like a couple $100 a piece. This version is actually mostly better because I had more and different control. Yes, and Dana Jones, who's in the feed here, she actually did the editing for this version. See, you did a great job. You and my friend Carmel. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Deanna. I guess that that brings us to 8:01. Are there any other questions, or are we good? Everybody, again, feel free to drop me a tip in the PayPal if you want, at futureoftradition@gmail.com. If you want to do Venmo, it's Paolo Garbanzo, PaoloGarbanzo, which is my husband because I don't have a Venmo. I'm too old fashioned. And I'm going to make a post about how we can, thanks. Yeah, I'll make a post about how we can do this together more through the next couple of weeks and or month. I appreciate you all, and thank you so much for listening and for bringing your enthusiasm. Thanks, Jessica. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't go to Amazon right now because they're only shipping critical things. In fact, how long can I even get to the post office? I don't know. But I'm available to talk to on the Etsy and so forth. In fact, you could probably just send me a message through Facebook, and as long as we do all this stuff, I can get you a deck if you want. It's $45 for the deck and the book and the box. You might be able to find them for cheaper online somewhere, but more of this money actually goes to me instead of, to some publisher. So anyway, everybody, I really appreciate you, and blessed be.